Hello everyone, it's Tuesday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. Just one day after the G7 summit, President Yoon Suk Yeol on Monday held another one, this time with the leadership of the European Union. The summit was the first in-person gathering between South Korea and EU leaders in 5 years, and the first time in 11 years that two EU presidents visited Seoul at the same time. Marking the 60th anniversary of diplomatic ties between the two sides, they agreed to further enhance cooperation in various fields. What does it mean to cement ties between the two sides, and what more could be done? For an in-depth analysis, we invite into the studio Eric Sung-soo Kim, CEO of Datacrunch Global and adjunct professor at Hanyang University and Ulsan National Institute of Science and Technology. Professor Kim, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
And we also have Michiel Hoogeveen, a Dutch member of the European Parliament. Good to see you, Mr. Hoogeveen.
Thank you so much for having me.
Right, first question to our Professor Kim. Now, President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and President of the European Council, Charles Michel, have concluded their trip to Seoul. Now, what does this visit to South Korea suggest, and how is European Union seeing South Korea as an economic partner?
So I think this visit was very meaningful, that both of the presidents of the Council and the Commission visited Korea. So it symbolized the importance of Korea as a diplomatic partner and a trade partner and an alliance partner. At the same time, it symbolized Korea's focus to EU as the third largest trade partner and the #1 investing region to Korea. And in this summit, it was very important that we have initiated and further discussed partnership in digital, health, and other sectors. And also, we had to have discussions of negotiating the terms of the CBAM and CRMA, terms that might be a little bit unfriendly to Korean companies.
Right, so it was symbolic indeed. Now, Mr. Hoogeveen, European leaders, including German President Olaf Scholz and the EU Council President, visited Panmunjom and condemned North Korea's ongoing provocations. And the EU leadership again underlined the need for CVID and urged Pyongyang to cease all nuclear-related activities. What are European countries' thoughts on tensions on the peninsula?
Well, I think we haven't seen a missile launch coming from North Korea for more than a month now. So with today's standards, I think this is a good development. No, but I get what Chancellor Scholz is saying. I get what President Charles Michel is saying, that we need, North Korea should refrain from nuclear testing, from missile testing. But I also think that we should take a step beyond this rhetoric. We should also work towards negotiating with North Korea. EU member states have diplomatic relations with both North Korea and South Korea. So by just saying these words when visiting the demilitarized zone, well, these are empty words if it's not followed up with action. And I think we should go back to the days of President Trump and President Moon Jae-in, where there actually were negotiations with both Koreas. And I think that European countries should facilitate a negotiating atmosphere between the two Koreas and exploit both of our diplomatic relations.
Right, I see your point. You're saying that we need to go one step further. Now, Mr. Hoogeveen, I'd like to ask you one more question. The bilateral relationship was elevated to a strategic partnership in 2010, and during this time summit, both sides agreed to strengthen ties in environmental, digital, and health areas as well. Now, firstly, let's tap onto the green sector. They agreed to launch this South Korea-EU Green Partnership. How can both sides push each other to further enhance this green transition?
Well, as we're seeing, the climate is changing and humans are accelerating this change. So when we need to tackle this, when we need to move away from fossil fuels, we have to tackle it globally. But we should not only focus on sustainability, we should also focus on the accessibility and the affordability for the people. And in the European Union, we are still very much narrow-minded and focused on building as much wind turbines and solar panels when we think we can power an entire continent with that, but that's not the case. I think we should also more focus on nuclear power, and I was actually quite disappointed that in this partnership agreement there was only one little sentence on nuclear power, and I think that South Korea is one of the leading economies in the world on nuclear power. I think the European Union can learn a lot from South Korea. So I think there should be more focus on nuclear power because, yeah, in the end, that's also not a CO2 emitting power source.
Right, I see your point. Now, Professor Kim, another notable aspect to look at is how the two parties agreed to boost economic ties. Now, both agreed to continue close consultations on the EU's CBAM, which is Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, and CRMA, the Critical Raw Materials Act. Now, what concerns do South Korean companies have regarding these measures, and could continuous consultation over these measures lead to a favorable result for South Korea?
So, EU's goal to reduce carbon emission by 2030 is to reduce it by the 55% level of from the 1990 standards. And that's the background that EU is driving these kind of initiatives. But the problem is during the reduction process, of course, countries that do not follow these kind of strict carbon emission deduction guidelines will have a lower production cost. So EU companies that manufacture within the territory of European Union will be worse off in terms of this act. So EU is imposing, penalties to countries that do not follow this guideline in a European standard, and that is impacting Korea a lot because the, products that are included are steel, aluminum, and fertilizer, etc. But still alone, we export $4.3 billion to EU. So it's a huge export, portion that will be entailed to these kind of measures. So that's the negotiation that we will have to have with European unions.
I see.
For the CRMA Act, we can consider it something like as a Inflation Reduction Act of US. So as the same line with US, EU wants to protect their markets. So critical raw materials, for example, like batteries, etc., should be manufactured within the territory of European unions to have favorable benefits. And we have the same problem with US in terms of the IRA arrangement. So those kind of things will be a long-term negotiation that we have to drive with EU, although we are a very important partner in terms of the digital health and green initiatives.
Right, I see. Now, Mr. Hoogeveen, two sides will focus their cooperation on boosting ties in the supply chain as well, especially with regard to chips. Now, they have promised to develop a common mechanism for the resilience of the supply chain and will also conduct joint research in that field. How is the European Union seeing the importance of South Korea's role in stabilizing this chip supply chain?
I think that the war in Ukraine, the COVID pandemic, and the more skeptical attitudes towards the rise of China as a global emerging economy has really showed the vulnerabilities that we have in our global supply chains, especially concerning chips. So we should work more together with like-minded countries, with like-minded free market liberal democracies on actually creating these supply chains that are more resilient. And in Europe, basically, we are looking at South Korea as a country that's more ahead when we look at the advancement in the field of artificial intelligence, for example. On the other hand, in the Netherlands, my country, we also have great companies that are a vital part of this global supply chain of chips, which is a company called ASML. Well, we can work together more in science, research, on business with these companies in order to make these supply chains more resilient in the future.
Right, I hope to see that too. Now, Professor Kim, now that our Mr. Hoogeveen came up with this, high-tech areas, I'd like to move on to the digital sector. They jointly welcomed the launch of the South Korea-EU digital partnership that was made last November and expected this to allow both to foster collaboration in many high-tech areas, including the artificial intelligence. Now, what benefits could both enjoy in terms of working together in these high-tech areas?
So the high-tech area requires a huge investment in terms of R&D. So it's not something that one company can drive. It should be first designed as a policy, science policy, at a national level to foster the industry. And what's really important is to have a comparable partnership with countries that have the similar science base to drive the technological innovations of these important digital technologies. Korea and EU have the very high standard of research institutes that we have. We have KAIST, SNU, UNIST, Hanyang University in Korea. And in Europe, we can't even name all the universities that are great. So that is the collaborative aspects that we are looking in terms of quantum computing, AI, and even digital ethics area that we have to develop together. And at the government level, we also have to set policies together to foster this industry. And of course, at the company level, we have very good companies like in Korea, we're superior in engineering. For example, Samsung Electronics, LG Electronics, and AI, we're comparable with EU. And in other areas, we can also collaborate. But most importantly, we need more human collaboration in terms of research and in the industry to foster this collaboration. So those will be the pillars of this partnership.
Right, I agree. Now, Mr. Hoogeveen, on the back of this summit, formal negotiations will begin for Seoul to join the Horizon Europe Research and Innovation Program. First of all, for our viewers who might not be familiar with this program, what is this and what would it mean for South Korea to join?
Horizon Europe is a 100 billion euro research program that had the original scope of including or having better cooperation in science and technology between European countries. But with the recent developments in the world, with the rise of China, with the blockization of world politics, Horizon Europe has gone beyond the scope of originally only European countries and now also includes like-minded, strong democratic parties or countries. So for South Korea to be included in this would mean that they would contribute a little to the budget of this research and development program, but on the other hand would gain access to a wide network of high-level research and universities. So I think this would be a very good development if South Korea would be included in this program.
Right, I cannot agree more. Now, Professor Kim, we cannot leave out the health and medical sector here, where both sides agree to assist each other in terms of effectively managing cross-border health problems and coming up with medical countermeasures. What does this imply in terms of South Korea being, the country that can contribute in the international arena more?
So we had the experience of COVID and learned how it's important to collaborate globally to overcome these kinds of unexpected pandemics.
Right.
So I think that's the motivation of a more facilitated cooperation emerging at a bilateral level or a multilateral level globally. And Korea has been recognized as a key partner in that domain with the science base of the pharmaceutical and the medical research that we do. We have one of the finest medical service around the world and also have a very strong research background. We also have emerging pharmaceutical companies such as Samsung Bio and SK Bio that can be a good partner with European strong pharmaceutical companies such as Sanofi or Merck. So we'll have to co-initiate these kind of health agendas at a global scale because, again, this agenda also requires a huge investment and also it requires a comparable scientific standards to cooperate with. And Korea is being recognized as a important partner in such global initiatives.
Right, it's good to hear how Seoul has this capacity to contribute more in terms of the health sector and medical sector. Now, Professor, considering all of the discussion that we have made up until now, how do you evaluate this time's summit between South Korea and the EU leadership in overall?
I think it was very timely because Korea has to secure the alliance with United States and Japan. But at the same time, EU is a very, very important partner to us. So we want to make sure that we also secure that alliance in a security domain and also an economic domain. So what President Yoon is emphasizing is a value alliance, meaning that we would partner with countries that share the value of democracy and market economy. So EU goes along with our values, and we have advanced that concept in a green sector and a health sector idea that we share and confirm that we share those values so that we can expand into a deeper and a strengthened partnership.
Now that I have heard how important this bilateral ties is between two countries, I'd like to know, Mr. Hoogeveen, what more can be done. Now, this year, like I said before, marks the 60th anniversary of bilateral ties between South Korea and the EU. And what further stepping stones could be laid down to ensure another 60 years of close partnership?
Well, I think the European Union and South Korea is one of the best relations that we can have as European Union. We have the free trade agreement between South Korea and the European Union. It's one of the most successful trading agreements that we have. It has fostered trade, it brings jobs, it brings prosperity. So I think we should expand upon these relations on the trade side. On the other hand, we should also recognize that the EU is not a country, it's not a state, and it will never become something like that. So the main driver behind the EU-South Korea relations are the member states, the individual member states on a European level. So for example, my country, the Netherlands, has great relations with the Republic of Korea. So I think we should recognize that on the side of trade, science, technology, we can definitely expand our scope, but the main drivers behind our fantastic relationship are still the individual member states.
Right, I see. We should definitely keep that in mind. Now, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition, but thank you, Professor Kim and Mr. Hoogeveen, for your insights. We really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.
That's all for Within the Frame tonight. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.